Hello, I'm Mark Don. Today I wanted to kind of rant a little bit, but really I want to pass on some information to you all as models so that you really understand what's going on with paperwork, releases, 2257 forms and stuff. This is information that I think is really, really important to you all. One of the things that I really wanted to rant about is it's come out in talking to a bunch of you all lately that a lot of photographers are not using any paperwork at all, and neither are you all. And that means that at the end of the day, there's really nothing stating what the usage of these images that you're shooting is for, who has what rights, what you're getting paid, what's your compensation, any of that. All of those things are really important and will keep everything happy and, no arguments, or at least reduce the amount of arguments in the future. I want to start this off by saying one thing though. It is very, very important that you discuss all of these things with the photographer you're going to work with ahead of time. Do not wait until the day of the shoot to bring all this stuff up. You want this all done, cleared up so that there's no, misunderstandings, no hard feelings. You want to be entirely professional about this. That's very, very important. In passing all this information on, I'm sure I'm not going to make a lot of photographers happy with my recommendations to you all as models, but the key to it really is that you address all of these things, all of these points with the photographer, with the client ahead of time, so that on the day of the shoot, there's no tension, no stress, no everything. It's all said, all done, all written up. So what happens when you don't do the paperwork? That's sort of where it seems like most of you all are living at now. And the complaints that I hear from models all the time will all be solved by having this paperwork done. One, well, I did it as a trade thing. It was a TFP, it was a trade for print, and I never got the images. Or, it's been 6 months and I still don't have the images, and then all of a sudden I get 2. Or, well, I was supposed to get paid X, but then they just paid me this, and I didn't have anything. What could I say? Well, all of those types of things can be solved with paperwork and proper paperwork and releases. And then the other one I hear a lot is, well, they said the photo shoot was going to be for this, but then it ultimately ended up being used in this place or that place or wherever, and I didn't agree to that. I would not have done that. So paperwork solves all of those problems, and proper paperwork solves all of those problems. If you're not providing the paperwork, then make sure you read the damn stuff. Don't just blissfully, oh, it's okay, and sign it. No. Read it. Take the time to understand what it's saying. And if you don't understand what it's saying, ask questions. And this is, again, why all this should be done way before the shoot. Whenever the first conversation about booking and you kind of agree that, yeah, I'm going to do this shoot, that's the point where you should be getting the paperwork from the photographer or from the client or from the magazine or from whoever it is that's hiring you and reading it over. Then you have plenty of time to figure it out. Figure out what it really says, what it really means, ask whatever questions, get advice, get all of that done ahead of time. So that when you come to the shoot, all you are doing is focusing on doing a great shoot. For me, in my business and my career, what I use when I'm working with models and clients is I use really 3 major pieces, well, 4 I guess, but 3 major things. 1 is a model release, 2 is a letter of intent, and 3 is a 2257 agreement. Let's start at the beginning. A letter of intent, what is it? A letter of intent is a very simple agreement that spells out the agreement between the model and the photographer, or the model and the client, or the photographer and the client. A model release is the actual legal document that releases the rights and specific usage to somebody. And 3, the 2257, that's a form that under federal law, if there's nudity involved in a shoot and it's going to be published, that has to be filled out. And all that form really is saying is it's documenting the age of the model so that there's no underage modeling with nudity. All right, let's talk about releases. Exactly what do they do? What do they mean? What does it say? Well, what a release actually is, it's the document that controls the rights, the usage rights. And when I say usage rights, what does that mean? It means, what are you saying the photographer can do with the images from the shoot? What are you agreeing to? And that's really the key, is what you agree to. There's no right, there's no wrong. This is just an agreement. You know, are you saying they can do anything they want with them forever and ever and ever? Or are you saying that they can only use them in this one magazine? Or are you saying they can only use them for their personal use? Or is it, you know, what are you all agreeing on? Whatever it is, it should be spelled out in the release and in the letter of intent. Most of the time, if you just walk into a shoot, the photographer or client is going to give you what I call a general purpose release. And that release is pretty all-encompassing. It kind of gives them the rights to do whatever they want to do forever and ever and ever, assign the rights, anything like that. One of the key ingredients of a release usually is going to give the photographer the rights to reassign those rights to somebody else. And what that's for is, if a photographer is shooting you for XYZ magazine, they need the right to reassign the rights that you've granted him to publish those images to that magazine or to that publication or to that website. One of the other clauses that always seems to freak models out in a release is, there's one in there that says they have the right to manipulate the image. They can distort, they can alter, they can do all of that. That clause is in there so that they can retouch pictures and do some composite work. You know, if you feel really uncomfortable with it, if you really think they're going to take your face and put it on somebody else's body, which legally that would give them the right to do, you can just write that in the release or on the release and get them to sign it or initial it. But without the right to manipulate the images, they can't retouch the images. And most of the time, you're going to want them to be retouched. The next thing that you're going to want to see in a release, or you're going to want to agree on, is, one, how long can the images be used? And two, where can the images be used? Specific usage, you know. Most general releases give the photographer the right to use the image forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And not only does it usually actually say that, but it says his heirs and assigns, which means that if he literally gives his children's children's children the right to use those images too, forever and ever and ever. Sometimes you're going to want to limit those rights. And that's just, you know, you can put in there, you can use these images for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 2 months, this one place, one time. Any way you want, whatever you all agree on is fair and fine, as long as you have agreed upon it ahead of time. Another big question that comes up a lot is the right to inspect the images before they're published. Who has that right? Well, on most general releases, you are foregoing, you're giving up that right as a model to inspect the images prior to publication. And really that's a practical choice, because most of the time a photographer, particularly in a professional setting, is not going to have time to go to you and say, do you like this picture? Do you want this one or that one or this one? And then get it to the client inside of a deadline. And if you hold up a photographer from meeting his deadline, that's not a good situation. And then it gets complicated. If you're going to have the right of inspection, you're going to have to be available at certain times and respond in certain times. And so most of the time you're going to have to forego that right. But if you really feel strongly about it, then change it. Make sure it's in there and make sure they agree to that. Most general releases also have a clause that says that these images can be used in conjunction with your name. And what that means is they can use your name with the pictures. And most of the time, most of you all are modeling under fictitious names, under a stage name. And you want to make sure the release reflects that. So it'll be on there usually, in some place it'll say model name, AKA, whatever. But that's a place in the release that you might want to change and make a little note in the margin of the release that says, do not use my real name, use my stage name, such and such, such and such, and make sure that everybody involved initials that, so that that doesn't happen to you and somebody doesn't make the mistake. And usually it's going to be an innocent mistake, but if you put it on the paperwork, most people won't make the mistake. Another option that might make all of this a lot simpler, particularly since so many of you all are modeling with people that don't use paperwork at all, is to provide your own paperwork, your own release, so that when you come to a shoot, you've already talked to the photographer ahead of time. You've told them, I'm going to bring this release and this is what it's going to say. And on that release, you spell out all the rights and everything, but you come prepared. You're not dependent on them, because most of the time they're just going to whip out a general purpose release, and that's not what you're saying, what you probably want to sign. So have it all figured out. You take the step to get the paperwork the way you want it to be. Give it to them ahead of time, and I stress, this all needs to be done ahead of time. No surprises the day of the shoot. And then everything's cool. You've controlled it, you've made sure it was done right, everything's clean, perfect. The second document I strongly recommend that you use is what I call a letter of intent, but really it's nothing more than a simple language agreement. And that's key. This doesn't require lawyers, it doesn't require legalese, it's just a very short, usually 1 page or less, 1 paragraph, well, a couple of paragraphs maybe, but half page or so, that spells out all the important points of your agreement. The release releases the right, but this covers a lot of other things that aren't covered with releases. First and foremost, it covers when is the shoot, what day, what time, what's the location. Are you being paid or are you being compensated? Is it a trade shoot? Is it a trade for print? If it's a trade for print, how many prints are you getting? How many images are you getting? Will they be retouched? How soon will you get those? Specifics. These are very specific points that should be in there. And this way, if you do this, all those issues about, I didn't get my pictures, they didn't do that, they didn't do, all those hard feelings, all those things just go away. Because if you have a document stating that you're going to get 5 prints from each look that you shoot, retouched, and they're going to be delivered in 2 weeks, most of the time photographers are going to take that serious because you came prepared, you had this, you all made this agreement, you put it in writing. That's a whole lot better than, oh yeah, I'm going to give you some prints at some point, man. Much better situation to be in. One of the ones that's in there that really is important is pay rate and when you're going to get paid. Be very specific on the pay rate. Is it an hourly rate? Is it an hourly rate that you're on the set or an hourly rate that you're on the location? Is it a half a day rate, a day rate? And if you are booked for a day and you only work a half a day, what happens? Do you get paid for the day because you booked it, you set it aside? You just got to make sure that's in the document and so that it's clear so everybody understands, because that way there's no confusion, no tension, no hard feelings. The other one that's real important is when are you going to get paid? Are you going to get paid at the end of the shoot, the end of the day? Or are you going to get paid 30 days later or 10 days later, or whatever it is? And how are you going to be paid? Is it going to be in cash? Is it going to be a check? Is it going to be a money order, bank transfer, however? As long as everybody's agreed, it's fine. Just make sure it's there. The letter of intent should also spell out exactly what's required of you or what's expected of you. And for example, it's like, well, we're planning on shooting a fashion shoot. It's going to be 6 looks, or it's going to be 2 looks. You're required to model an implied, or are you required to model nude? How nude? Is it Playboy level? How explicit is what I'm saying? Is it erotic? Exactly what it is that's being expected of you. Because the last thing that you want, the last thing a photographer should want also, is for you to get to the shoot and all of a sudden be surprised. Oh wait, I didn't know this was an implied shoot. I don't do that. That's a bad situation. So this will eliminate that. Generally, the letter of intent should also include exactly how many looks that you're expected to shoot, because sometimes your situations come up where it's like, oh well, I want to shoot as much as we can possibly shoot in a half a day. Well, you're not going to be really happy if somebody's shooting 10-minute looks and shoots 40 looks of you in a half a day. That's probably not what you really intended as a model. So get it spelled out. Yes, it's a half a day shoot. We're expected to shoot up to 6 looks, up to 4 looks, up to whatever it is that you all agree to. Key here again, and I know I've said it over and over and over, is that everybody agree ahead of time, so there's no issues later. Letter of intent should also include any special circumstances, like are you going to be required to model in a pool? Are you going to be required to get wet? Is it going to be freezing cold temperatures? Are you shooting inside a freezer because it's an ice castle? Anything that's out of the ordinary should really be spelled out in the letter of intent. Are you going to be modeling wet clothing? Usually things that would, is it a standing on a cliff, hanging off of a bridge? Any weirdness like that should definitely be spelled out and agreed to ahead of time. And the letter of intent should also spell out what other paperwork is going to be required of you, i.e., you've got to sign a release. You may have to sign a liability release. You have to fill out and sign a 2257. All those things should be spelled out in the letter of intent, saying, okay, along with this agreement, we need this, 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 and this. So that should all be in there. So there's, again, just to be clear. The other one that comes up all the time is wardrobe. Who's providing the wardrobe? Who's providing the styling? You want that in the letter of intent also. I mean, if the photographer is expecting you to come prepared to shoot 4 looks and bringing the wardrobe, clothes, shoes, wigs, whatever, to do the 4 looks, it should be in there. You should know that. You should be absolutely clear that that's what's expected of you. If not, if they're providing the wardrobe, it should just say that. Who's doing hair and makeup? Is that your responsibility, or are they going to provide a makeup artist and a hair person? Again, spell it out. Because if you show up and you were expecting a makeup artist, you didn't bring any makeup, and all of a sudden the photographer is expecting you to be able to do your makeup, now you have a bad situation. What's going to happen? All of that, solve it ahead of time, paperwork, fill it out, make sure you got it. And then the last one that's usually included in the letter of intent is what rights do you as a model have to these images? None? Or do you get to use them in your portfolio? Can you post them on the internet? Can you put them on a website? Can you charge money for them? Can you go to a convention and do autographs and sign and sell the prints? All of those types of things, if they're worked out ahead of time, it's much, much better, because it's always better to have it done than 2 months later you be going to some convention and you want to have prints there to sign and you want to use this photographer's prints, and you call him up and go, hey Joe, can I use these prints? And they go, no. Well, now you're disgruntled. Now you're in a bad situation. Now you don't have anything to take. You were expecting this to be there, but you didn't specify it, so it's not there. So again, think these things through, and this is why you don't want to do this the day of the shoot. You want to take the time, take a day, 2 weeks before the shoot or whenever it's booked, to figure all this stuff out. So make sure that you've got it all covered. I know that sounds like a lot of stuff to be included in a letter of intent, but it's really, really not. It's really a very short, as I said, it's a short document, it's half, 3/4 of a page, a place for you to sign it, a place for the photographer to sign it, and it's dated. It's all good. Again, let me stress, this is simple language type stuff. This is logical stuff. This doesn't require lawyer kind of stuff. It's like, I'm going to be at a certain time, a certain place, I'm going to be there so long, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to get paid this much. Or I'm going to get these prints and I'm going to get them at this time. Boom, I'm going to provide the wardrobe, you're going to provide the hair and makeup, all good, sign it, done. It's just that simple. But it's really, really important. Okay, 2257, what is it? Well, 2257 refers to a federal law. That law is to protect minors from posing nude. What the form really says, and what you're saying on the form, is you're swearing under penalty of law that you're 18 years old and that you're an adult. And you can do this shoot that includes nudity. That's it, that's all it is. You should keep a copy of this for your records, but it's required under the law that the photographer actually have the original signed agreement with 2 forms of your ID to prove that you're of age. He's got to keep that in his files and be able to produce it for the government at any given moment.